You got a little Shedeur in the background. Watch Shedeur. Hey man, Shedeur grinding to his own music, man. We know he showed us the house in Cleveland during the season. It's just Shedeur working, grinding, been doing it since when?
Everybody wants to act surprised right now. Everybody wants to act like Shedeur Sanders just discovered a work ethic in the middle of the offseason, like it's some new thing. It's not new. It was never new. What happened this week is the cameras finally caught up to something this man has been doing since before anybody was paying attention. And once you see the full picture, you're going to understand exactly why the narrative around him keeps having to change.
So, here's what actually happened. Shedeur went back to Boulder, back to Colorado, back to his college campus, back to Coach Prime, back to offensive coordinator Coach Marion, who, by the way, has been one of the most respected offensive minds in college football for years now. This is the offseason. This is supposed to be vacation. Guys are supposed to be resting. Instead, Shedeur is out there in that high altitude, that thinner air, doing extra conditioning work most guys wouldn't even think about touching in June. And he didn't do it alone. He brought Gage with him. Gage is the guy who's been around Shedeur before there was even a real quarterback battle to talk about, back when Shedeur was still just a kid throwing to equipment managers because nobody else was watching yet. That's the kind of detail that gets left out when people talk about Shedeur like he showed up overnight. He didn't show up overnight. He's had the same circle, the same work partners, doing the same thing for years. While he was out there, he linked back up with his father, obviously a Hall of Fame legend in his own right, and got access to resources most rookies never see in their entire career. High-level coaching, high-level facilities, a program built by people who know exactly what it takes to develop a quarterback. And instead of treating the trip like a vacation, he treated it like a training camp inside his own offseason. This is the part that gets buried under all the noise. People love to talk about Shedeur's draft stock, his critics, the narrative wars on Twitter. What they don't talk about nearly enough is the actual routine, the actual hours, the actual sled pulls, the actual film, the actual grind that's been happening quietly in the background the entire time, whether anyone was filming it or not. And here's the thing people keep missing. This isn't a story about a guy trying to prove a point to his doubters. This is a guy who's been running the exact same routine since he was a teenager, throwing routes to whoever showed up to catch them. The critics didn't create this work ethic. They just showed up late to it. Let's go to the tape.
New for him. I would love to tell you that Shedeur is doing some crazy thing, going to Colorado, getting in that higher elevation where the air is a little thinner and it takes a little more, where it takes more out of you, right? That high altitude training down there or up there in Boulder, Colorado, linking back up with his alma mater, linking back up with his guy, obviously Coach Prime. I mean, that's his dad's more than his guy, and then Coach Marion, and you know, you're gonna see something here. It's the off season. It's the off season, right? This is vacation time, right? And word to Cam Ward, you know what I'm saying? If you, and you know, Cam Ward, Shedeur from the same camp, same quarterback coach, right? We don't do none of that off time, man. Like it's off time, but we doing what we need to do. It's off time, but I'm in high altitude.
Off season, not game week. Off season, and he's already back at it. Now here's where it actually gets interesting, because it's not just the Colorado trip. Shedeur has a whole setup back home in Cleveland too. He's got a studio built into his own house, and while some guys are unwinding after OTAs, he's grinding to his own music in the background, working out with Gage, with his guy Studs behind the camera. This isn't a one-time thing for a highlight reel. This is a pattern. Same people, same intensity, different city, same result. And this is exactly the kind of thing that gets ignored when the conversation turns negative, because let's be honest about what's been happening in the media around Shedeur this offseason. There's been a real push from certain corners to paint him as somehow behind, somehow not doing enough, somehow needing extra motivation just to catch up. One reporter in particular put it out there that Shedeur was falling behind Deshaun Watson early in the program, and that it took a very candid, frank conversation with the coaching staff before Shedeur supposedly turned things around. Think about how that story's built. It's built on the idea that a young quarterback needed to be pushed into working hard, that he was coasting until somebody sat him down. But go back and watch literally any offseason from Shedeur's career. Go back to college. Go back to games where he was out there putting in extra work on bye weeks, traveling to get reps in against opponents most people had never heard of, doing it long before there was ever a spotlight worth chasing. And it's been reported, not by Shedeur's own camp, but by outside reporters covering the team, that he hasn't left the building since Todd Monken took over as head coach. That's not spin from a fan account. That's coverage from people inside the building watching it happen in real time. Nobody has ever been able to actually deny the work he puts in. Not his harshest critics, not the anonymous league sources, nobody. You can debate his stats, you can debate his accuracy on a given throw, but the one thing that keeps surviving every single narrative cycle is the work ethic. It's the one thing nobody can find a receipt to argue against. And that's really the core problem with the falling behind storyline. It assumes the audience following Shedeur is only seeing the highlight reel, the game day clips, the social media posts. But a lot of that off-season grind never even makes it to Shedeur's own pages, the Cleveland studio sessions, the extra reps with Gage and studs. Most of that surfaces through other people filming it, not through Shedeur promoting himself. He's not out here building a narrative. He's just doing the work and letting other people catch it on camera if they happen to be around. That's a very different picture than the one certain reporters are painting when they suggest he needed to be pushed.
All right. I don't want to spend too much time. I'm gonna do this on the second channel because this is pretty funny. I want to watch it. What I want to show you is Shedeur actually grinding. So I want to see what kind of work he's putting in. I saw him pulling the sled. Right, y'all go watch the full off media video. Oh, you got a little Shedeur in the background. Watch Shedeur. Hey man, Shedeur grinding to his own music, man. We know he showed us the house in Cleveland during the season. He got the studio in the crib over there in Cleveland, and there they go. There's Gage.
One side is out here pulling sleds in the off-season. The other side is out here writing paragraphs about a conversation that supposedly had to happen to make that guy care. So, let's talk about that supposed conversation and why it matters. Because there's a report out there suggesting Todd Monken had to have a direct talk with Shedeur about what it takes to actually win the starting job. The idea being that showing up on game day alone wasn't going to cut it. And sure, that might make for a good storyline. It's the kind of thing that would work great in a movie, but it's not really what's happening on the ground. What's actually been reported by multiple outlets covering the team directly is that Shedeur hasn't left the building since the new staff arrived. That's not a guy who needed convincing. That's a guy who was already there. The narrative that he needed a wake-up call doesn't line up with a guy who's been showing the same level of commitment since before he was even the starter, back when nobody outside his own circle had any reason to expect anything from him. And here's where it gets even more telling. Watch how fast the story flips once the results start showing up on the field. Early in the process, the framing was that Shedeur looked behind, that he wasn't sharp, that Deshaun Watson had the clear edge. Then a few weeks pass. Suddenly, the same voices are saying Shedeur closed the gap. Suddenly, he put his nose to the grindstone. Suddenly, he woke up. But think about what that actually implies. It implies there was a gap to begin with, one that these same reporters created in the first place off a handful of early practices. And now that Shedeur has performed well enough that they can't ignore it, instead of admitting they got it wrong early, the story becomes about him suddenly discovering effort. That's not accurate. That's narrative management. That's covering for an early take that didn't hold up once the actual reps started happening. The truth is a lot less dramatic and a lot more consistent. Shedeur didn't wake up. Shedeur didn't have some hidden reserve of motivation unlocked by a stern conversation. Shedeur has been doing the same thing the entire time, in Colorado, in Cleveland, in every offseason going back years. And the only thing that changed is that people finally started paying attention long enough to notice. There's also a pattern worth pointing out in how the criticism itself gets delivered. Some of the negative coverage never actually comes with specifics, no breakdown of a bad read, no clip of a blown coverage, just a general sense that Shedeur isn't good enough or can't read defenses, repeated without much backing it up. Compare that to the people actually inside the building or breaking down the tape who point to real things, footwork, going through progressions, getting the ball out on time. When the praise comes with specifics and the criticism doesn't, that tells you a lot about which side actually did the homework.
use whenever I cover Shedeur, right, is sometimes, y'all make people feel like they're going crazy for supporting somebody who's working really hard. It's easy to support and root for Shedeur because I've seen when the offseason comes, he puts in extra work. We see as soon as Coach Monken gets in Shedeur hasn't left the building. It's reported by multiple people. You got Jason Lloyd. He had to report it finally. Nobody can ever deny the work that he puts in. You can talk about stats and talent and all that stuff. We can have those conversations. But where we start crossing lines and where we do get disrespectful.
So which is it? Did he suddenly start working hard, or did the story around him finally catch up to what he was already doing? Now let's do the actual math, because this is where the whole narrative really falls apart. The claim going around is that Shedeur closed the gap over the last 3 to 4 weeks of OTAs and minicamp. Sounds like a slow burn story, right? Guy grinds for a month, earns his way back into it. Except 3 to 4 weeks is basically the entire off-season program. OTAs run about 3 to 2 weeks. Mandatory minicamp is 1 more week on top of that. So when someone says it took 3 to 4 weeks for Shedeur to close a gap, what they're actually describing is the normal, expected timeline for a second-year quarterback to settle into a completely new offense under a new coaching staff. That's not a redemption arc. That's just how football works. And remember, the original panic take, the one claiming Shedeur was falling behind, was built off of roughly 3 practices. 3, not 3 weeks. 3 individual sessions at the very start of the entire program, before install even ramps up. That's the sample size that got used to declare a gap in the first place. So the same people who were ready to hand the job to Deshaun Watson off 3 practices are now acting amazed that it took a full month for a young player to catch up in a complete new offense. You can't have it both ways. Either 3 practices tells you nothing, in which case the original panic was overblown, or 3 practices tells you everything, in which case the month-long gap-closing story doesn't make sense either. What actually happened is simple. A second-year player took the expected amount of time to learn a new offense, and he used that time better than most people expected, because that's what he's always done. There was no secret motivation switch. There was no wake-up moment. There was just Shedeur doing what Shedeur does, and a media cycle that had to quietly rework its own story once the results came in. That's the real headline here. Not that Shedeur suddenly started grinding. He never stopped. The only thing that actually changed is how many people were finally forced to notice it.
Notice this. Shedeur Sanders came on so strong in the last 3 to 4 weeks. Remember when Mary Kay Cabot initially reported this? Because this is where the media likes to expose themselves. The last 3 to 4 weeks. What happened before the 3 to 4 weeks? You had 3 practices. Right? And 3 practices, Mary Kay, you were ready to call the quarterback competition a quit.
That's not a gap closing. That's just a normal month of football, and everybody knows it. So let's put the whole thing together. Shedeur spent his offseason in Colorado, training in high altitude, working with his old coaches and his father, bringing the same people who've been with him since before any of this was public. He came home to Cleveland and kept going. Studio sessions, sled work, the same circle grinding right alongside him. Reporters covering the team confirmed he hasn't left the building since the new coaching staff took over. None of that is new behavior. It's the same pattern he's run for years. What actually shifted is the story around him. Early on, a narrow sample of 3 practices got turned into a wave of coverage suggesting he was behind. Weeks later, once the results caught up, that same coverage flipped into praise for supposedly closing a gap, using language that made it sound like Shedeur had just discovered effort for the first time. But when you actually run the timeline, 3 to 4 weeks is just the normal off-season program. There was never a secret turnaround. There was only a young quarterback doing what he's always done, in a system that gave him time to prove it. The work never stopped. The only thing that changed is who was finally watching. So here's the real question, and I want you to actually think about it before you answer. Do you think Shedeur genuinely needed that wake-up moment the reporters keep describing? Or do you think the media simply built a gap out of 3 practices and then had to quietly walk it back once the tape didn't support it? Drop your answer in the comments. Wake-up moment or media narrative, and let's see which side actually has the receipts. Because based on everything you just watched, from Colorado to Cleveland to the actual math on the calendar, it sure doesn't look like Shedeur ever needed to be told the grind. Smash like and subscribe.